Hello, Principal Matters podcast listeners. We have a great one for you today, don't we, Will?
Yeah,
It's
it's gonna
called
be us.
Yeah, it's coaching and mentoring. So you get us from the opening Q&A all the way through a great conversation about coaching and mentoring. But we are going to open with this fun, quick question just to get you all started. Let's call this the amuse-bouche, shall we? The quick amusement for our palates. This is the question. What strategies work best when dealing with parents and teachers who are resistant to growth? Okay, you guys can't see this, but Will just threw his head back and laughed because I think he finds this question delightful. Tell us
This
why
is
you're
the
laughing.
question. Yeah. So this is the question that I think every time I send out like a survey, and it ends up somewhere in the mix because it's the thing that drives us the most crazy, which is we're just trying to improve or we're just trying to grow. We're just trying to do something new. And why is it so hard for people to change? And so I'm going to begin, Jen, where I always begin in this conversation. And this is not going to be a fun response, but here goes. The first place to begin when it comes to resistance is yourself. Look in the mirror and ask, what am I pushing back against? And what am I complaining about? And what do I hate about whatever's happening around me? Because I'm going to bet you resist too. And so I always first have to begin with my own mindset. Okay, what am I pushing so hard against recently? Or what am I resisting changing? And I have to like examine my own mindset and then kind of recalibrate and go, okay, maybe this is not as hard as I thought it was going to be, or maybe this is something that I can learn from, or maybe this is something that's growing and stretching me. Because when your attitude about resistance is recalibrated, it's a little bit easier to show grace to other people when they feel resistant too. So Jen, I'll just start there that I always have to look in the mirror first because I want to be judgy to other people that are resisting, but I can find myself being resistant.
Right. And I think, there was that great book many of us older folk read, Who Moved My Cheese. It is really hard to get your cheese moved. It really is. And I call this the yeah but phenomenon. I should probably write a book on that. Yeah, but where you say, "Hey guys, we need to make some change. This is going to be exciting. We're going to get better. We're going to grow." And people will go, "Well, yeah, but," and they tell you all the reasons why they can't. I think yeah, but comes from fear. It comes from not knowing what you really mean when you say, "Hey, we're going to change." There's a tiny little passive insult in saying, "We're going to get better," because what we're saying is we're not so great. We got to do something differently. And so people tend to get defensive because they feel that tiny, tiny little insult. And I think it's fair. I'm not denying it's there, but we are always trying to get better. And different does not mean worse. Different might mean worse if we try something and it doesn't go well, and again, that's okay too. So, my your idea to first look in the mirror is similar to mine, which is first look at the fear. What is it that's freaking people out about this? And get to that first. Talk about that first. And then it's okay. We've acknowledged the fears, we've gotten through the yeah buts, and now let's think about the what ifs rather than the yeah buts.
Agreed. Now I'm going to give 4 tips on managing resistance that there's no way we can unpack in 60 seconds or less because this is a 5-minute
I
Q&A.
was gonna say 4 tips? What do you think you got, 40 minutes?
So, no, I
Listeners, I'm
don't.
sorry.
So,
When
so
he
if you
holds
want,
up
if you
4
want the
fingers.
extended version of this, I'll have to put a link to other shows where we
Right.
talked about resistance, or you can just set up a call with me and I'll just we'll talk about it on the phone or through Zoom. But here they go. First, anticipate. If you know what's coming up and you can plan for it as far in advance as possible, you lower people's stress when it comes to resistance. 2, beta test ideas instead of just like completely changing and overhauling everything. Sometimes you can test it before you do it. 3, celebrate small wins. And a friend of mine actually taught me this on a climb one time. He was like, "Well, if you don't celebrate till you get to the top, you've missed the opportunity to really enjoy this climb. So stop every once in a while, just celebrate where we've gotten and enjoy the view." And then finally, I think that was it. Let's see. Celebrate, beta test. Oh, backward plan. If you know the very end goal that you want to do, then just start backward planning it by putting specific times and dates and action plans in place way before you get there. There you go, Jen. Wow.
Okay, 4 things. That was fast. Well done. Okay, well, let's just delight and inspire our listeners some more, shall we, with our conversation about coaching and mentoring. Let's dig in.
Yeah, well, I think this is going to be a deep dive into some of the things you've been writing and talking about. So I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation. But Jen, thank you for this Q&A, and Principal Matters listeners, thank you for for doing what matters. Principal Matters Podcast, episode 424. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the school leaders podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. I'm here this week with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, Deputy Superintendent at Dublin City Schools and author of a gazillion great books. And Jen, this week, I want to talk about the principal as mentor and coach. And I'm actually going to ask you to be on the other side of the mic today because you recently published a wonderful article in ASCD's Education Leadership Magazine in the September issue. And you jump into this conversation around the principal as mentor and coach. And I just want to commend, and we'll put a link to the article in today's show notes. First of all, kudos for the wonderful publications that you're sharing, not just through your books, but throughout the education publication world. But let me just begin by asking you, if you don't mind, to set the stage for what motivated you to step into this conversation before I start probing into the content itself.
Right. Well, let me first tell you that anyone who's done any publishing knows there's a bit of a lag from when you write something and see it through edits and when you hold it in your hands. And so during that lag, I had actually done a lot of thinking about the principal serving as mentor and coach. And then when I read the article, I thought, "Oh, this is actually pretty good." So I'm very proud of this piece. I really
Good.
am, because in that time, in that lag, I had thought about it, and I led a new teacher orientation.
Hmm.
And there were probably 6 or 7 school and district leaders in the room. And here's what I found both hilarious and validating. Every one of the people leading these new teachers wanted to introduce themselves with their own My First Day story.
Hmm.
Some of these people had been in education 35 years, and they still acutely remembered that first day, that
Oh my
first week,
gosh,
the
yeah.
first year. All of us. And we hadn't met and said, "Hey, let's all tell our first year story." We didn't do that. It just happened. And jokes were shared about, the earth cooling before this one person started, and then how long it had been and how things had changed. And I got the mic last, and I was like, "Well, I want to tell my story too." All of that is to say, the first year, anytime someone is new at teaching, it is a pivotal time. And even if they hit the ground running and they need very little mentoring and coaching, there's profound memories being made. And I just think that's important to remember, that first year is so incredibly seismic. And if we don't get it right, we will lose the teacher, or they will go down a path perhaps of negativity and cynicism that we don't want. We want it to be a year full of hard work and joy and celebration.
I'm glad you said that. And I'm going to just refer to some research by Dr. Anthony Muhammad that I think confirms exactly what you just said, because in his book, Transforming School Cultures, he did a lot of research into the difference between healthy school cultures and toxic school cultures. And as a result, he was trying to determine whose voices are the most predominant in the healthy cultures and whose voices are the most predominant in the most toxic cultures. And he came up with 4 categories: believers, people that are collaborative, they're not afraid of change, they're in it for every kid, um, they are team players. Tweeners, which is exactly what you're talking about right now, the newest, most open, impressionable members of our team, who, depending on who mentors them, will be shaped into either a believer or these other 2 categories. Category 3, survivors, people that are misplaced or burned out or feel hopeless or unsupported. And so they're just hanging on every day, and no one wants their kids taught by that person. And so we have to do some triage there. Or the 4th category he calls fundamentalists, which are people that are committed to the profession for themselves. It's all about protecting my turf, protecting my content, protecting which kids I get to choose my own kids. It's my kids, not our kids. And a fundamentalist might be even a strong instructor, but their goal is protecting autonomy at all expense and sabotaging and defaming anything that's going to somehow infringe on their comfort zone. And those are, of course, giving you a broad stroke generalization of that entire book. So read it, listeners. But Jen, the reason I'm giving you that is because of that piece on tweeners. how we choose to onboard or who we choose to partner with or how we choose to mentor and even coach the people on our teams often does influence who they become in terms of an educator, because everyone starts off eager and excited and enthusiastic. What they become in their career will often be shaped by their experiences, but often shaped by who's coaching and mentoring them.
Well, exactly. And, in this article, I talk about how the principal can serve as mentor and coach. And it, kind of implicit in that is the assumption that the principal is also the evaluator. So let's talk about that first, because we need to talk about it. Many principals get hung up on the fact that, I'm the evaluator of this person. If they're struggling or they're not right for this profession, I have to, as we say, evaluate them out. I have to put them on an improvement plan. And also connected to that is, this is somebody's life, right? They have to pay the mortgage, they have to live in this community, whatever it is. It's a big deal if things aren't going well. And so sometimes principals say, I can't be the coach, I can't be the mentor because I'm the judge. And there is some truth to that, but I argue that you actually can. You can merge these three roles, and I say in this article, I used to think mentoring as very distinct from coaching. Mentoring was for new teachers. It was for people who had just started and they needed a mentor and a friend. And I kind of joke that, the mentor's job is to tell them where to find the copy machine and tell them where not to park to not make anybody mad. And then I thought coaching was very distinct from that. Coaching was about instructional mastery and content and the process of planning a lesson, modeling a lesson, reflecting, improving, and so on. And then distinct from that, of course, was the evaluation piece. So I argue here that we really need to merge those three roles, especially in districts, and we have a lot of them across this country and the world, small districts where perhaps the budget doesn't allow for an instructional coach, or mentors have to be just informal friends, right? So many times the principal is called upon to be all three roles.
That's so brilliant. And I'm glad you said it that way. No, because it's true. Those, and that was one of the first thing that intrigued me when I opened your article was the discussion between what's a mentor versus a coach. But then as a principal, you're also playing the role of evaluator. So you really are dancing between all of
Mhm.
those roles. And you talk about in the article just the importance of learning how to merge those. So talk a little bit about what were some of the thoughts that you had for the different strategies that leaders can use to merge those roles.
So I list in the article 10 strategies, and I don't think we need to go through all of them here, but the first one in my mind is probably the most important, and that is to learn what coaching looks like. Some weeks back, Will, we aired an episode where I was talking to Elena Aguilera, and she is the owner of Bright Morning, and coaching is her jam. She does it masterfully, and I knew what coaching was, so no big deal, right? I was just going to interview this coach. Well, as I talked to her, I thought, man, I have allowed my saw to get pretty dull here. I need to go back. I need to read some books on coaching. I need to re listen to this podcast. I need to talk to some coaches and just hear how they um, lead. How they lead a conversation with the teacher. What questions do they ask? How do they prompt new thinking? We've got to keep our saws very sharp in the coaching world. So, being trained as a principal and not as a coach, it's easy to fall into the safe zone of managing the school, managing the facility, managing the people. But we have to say, oh, wait, 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 I can be a coach too. And so to kind of relearn the nuances of coaching, knowing when to use those skills and when not to, is, it's basically a springboard because you can jump on those skills anytime you think, this is a coaching moment, not a evaluator moment or a mentoring moment.
Well, and we've talked about one of the other points that you make, which is the importance of focusing on new teachers. So let's talk about the third area where you talk about that balance, because when you have
Mhm.
academics, rigor, assessment, instruction, there's a lot going on. Talk about why it's important for people to um, remember that balance.
Yeah, it's so easy. I think because it's measurable and easy to talk about. it's easy to focus on things like outcomes, standards, data driven results. And in doing so, we run the risk of killing the natural intuition of a teacher, their joy, their energy. And, I say in the article, but I say all the time in the real world too, what I value most in new teachers is an open mind and an open heart. We want them to believe in students. We want their purpose to be, I'm here to help kids grow. I'm here to get them ready for whatever's next. And so I think it's balancing what we know we want, which is outcomes, with what we know we need long term, which is heart, empathy, work ethic, connection, dedication, commitment, all of those things. It has to be a balance. And we can't make the mistake of overshadowing one for the other because it's easier. We have to, we can say, and well, you and I have talked about this in the podcast before. We can say, hey, how your data, your results, it looks awesome. How are you doing? Are you enjoying your students? Tell me what it is that keeps you up at night. Tell me about the environment in your room, your how it looks, how it feels. Talk about those things just as much as you talk about test results.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Over 1 million teachers use IXL in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? IXL is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. IXL gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, IXL has decades of expertise and is proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across 45 states show that those who use IXL outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit IXL.com/PM to learn more.
Hello, Principal Matters listeners. I'm Jethro Jones, a good friend of Will's. It's time for a change. Are you tired of fighting fires, dealing with disengaged students, and missing out on real connections with your staff? Imagine a school where you leave on time, work with parents, and lead with purpose. Since you're a listener of Principal Matters, you're probably already doing a lot of these things. Well, I want to help you take your great work to an even higher level. Join the SchoolX book study, and you'll walk away with actionable strategies to transform and improve your school, manage your time, and reduce your stress. In just 5 sessions, we'll dive into practical tools like design thinking, live sessions, and even explore using AI to lighten your load. This is about creating a school where every teacher, every student, and you can thrive. Don't miss out. Head on over to jethro.site/will and start transforming your school today. That's jethro.site/will. And I'll see you in there soon.
Let's stay really practical because, and I know we've talked about this in other settings, but I want to talk about it in the context of coaching and mentoring. You also give the advice, don't assume that they know. So let's go there for just a moment, because I think sometimes, especially the longer we're in this work, we forget what it's like to be newer in the work.
Absolutely. And this I think is a risk that anyone runs. I remember when I first started, I was a server, a waitress, a bartender for a long time. And I remember going into training and they were using words. I was like, what are you even talking about? What is a highball? What is an expo? What's a souffle cup? I didn't even know, right? And so we do that to new teachers all the time. We use EduSpeak, and it's easy to say, okay, well, they just came out of a bachelor's program or a master's program. How did they not know that? Well, because the person teaching them or the school in which they did their field experience may not be using the same terms that you, as the principal in their, in the school where they're now employed, are using. And so we often assume they know things. We might say to a new teacher in one sentence, and I'm just making this up, so we'll see how it comes out. We might say, hey, now that you're settled in, we're going to ask you to join the PBIS team. Your MTSS plans will be due about the time that your IEPs are due. And if you have some SST ideas, we'd like you to come and bring them in related to the 504s or the ETRs. like, I just made that up, but
Oh, that was
we
brilliant.
the teacher's sitting there like, "What did that person just say to me?"
Mhm.
So, teachers sometimes feel intimidated asking questions because they don't wanna look stupid. They don't wanna look like they didn't know or they didn't learn anything when they were in college. Principals need to slow down and do one thing at a time. And anytime, this is my challenge to myself, anytime an acronym comes out of my mouth, I try to check myself. Is this a universal acronym like IEP, or is it one that we may have made up, like BLT, Building
Mhm.
Leadership Team? I've been in buildings where we say PLC, but we actually mean something else. We use leadership team and we might call it a PLT, a BLT, an elemental PQRST. I don't even know. We have to make sure that what we're saying actually is being received by the person to whom we're communicating.
You also give the advice of learning to listen to their ideas, and I'm just going to quote you to you. You say just because they're young or new doesn't mean they can't bring innovation a fresh lens. So, talk a little bit about as leaders the importance of inviting their input, not just giving yours.
Here's what makes me sad. When a school has an opening and everyone's kind of excited because it's a chance to have new, fresh ideas. Exactly like when we were in school and a new kid moved in, right? It was a chance for a new friend. It was a chance to learn about someone who came from a different place. There's this excitement. And then the teacher moves in, the new kid moves in, and we find they might have, gasp, a flaw or two, and then we write them off. So we think, "Ugh, this person is so annoying. This person asks too many questions. This person isn't prepared. This person doesn't really know the content. This person," and we then dismiss them as
Mhm.
not having value. And I think that happens a lot more than we're willing to admit.
Mhm.
And so I think we need to keep that freshness and the excitement of new ideas, new creativity, new experiences. We need to keep that alive. And so in meetings, we might need to say, "Hey," and I'm making this up. "Hey, Catherine. Catherine, what do you think? Catherine, in your field experience, did you ever run into this?
Mhm.
Catherine, what you've read pedagogy textbooks more recently than we have. What have you found? Bring out those experiences that that
Yeah.
person might have in a specific and authentic way to make sure that their voices are heard. And then I also talk, kind of later in the article about, man, don't forget how new these people are. Teaching is so nuanced. Being an educator is complicated. It's not like riding a bike. It's like riding a bike, driving a car, sitting in a school bus, and on a unicycle at the exact same time. And
Mhm.
so I once had a principal kind of disparage a new hire, and I had to say, you do realize this new teacher, he's been on the job 6 weeks. That's not even long enough to recover from an ankle sprain. Seriously, slow your roll, give this person time and set yourself up to be the one that makes them a success rather than kind of eye rolling how difficult it is to work with a new teacher.
I'm glad you said that, Jen. So I think every educator thinks back to their first couple of
Yes.
years with just such agony,
Yes.
because I remember having in my first year the department chair for the English department where I was teaching, having the department chair's daughter in my class, and I remember how kind she was when she would sit with and reflect with me on how things are going because she was my mentor. But then I think back to that 30 years later, and I'm just cringing that that poor girl had to sit in my class for that year while her mother, who had decades of experience, was just down the hall and could have given her like such a more robust experience in learning language arts. But yet,
I'm gonna
I had to start somewhere.
I'm
I had to
gonna
start. Yeah, yeah,
and
and so
and
did
I'm gonna
she.
push back. I'm gonna
Yeah.
push back on you really hard here, Will, because I bet if you called her right now and you said to her, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I was so new." I bet she'd say, "What are you talking about? You were kind. You were wonderful. You knew your stuff. You were putting in the time. Your feedback was amazing." I bet that is something you're carrying, but I
Mhm.
bet your students thought you were the cat's meow. Because new teacher, even if you're not as experienced or as fluid with your technique or whatever, you bring so many other things that
It's true.
overcompensate deliberately for those things. So I do. I betcha your students would think you were out of your mind for saying that. I bet they
No,
thought you were
yeah.
excellent.
Well, I'm so glad you said that because it just as a, I'm going to say this to us as experienced leaders, because you and I are now. Um, that's such a good reminder to keep growing, to take risks, to try new things, to not get in a rut. Because you're right, people that are on the other side of someone who's willing to stay fresh and willing to try new things. And I mean, you know the difference when you're on, like, I don't know, you're on a tour and you can tell the tour guide has memorized this so well that they're
Yep.
just opening their mouth like a robot and the words are coming out, even if they're trying to sound funny or they're trying to sound interesting, versus the one who sounds fresh and like, I feel like I'm the only one
Yep.
who's ever heard this.
Yep.
There's a difference.
There's
And
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
I don't,
And I would say too, I think back at my first year, I kind of was self disparaging a few weeks ago when I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was talking about my first year and I said, "Oh my God, I did it all. I coached cross country, I coached basketball, I coached track, I led student council, I led an equity team. I had no life." And then driving home, I thought, wait a minute, I did have a life. That was my life. That was
yeah.
what I did. And shame on me for thinking that's some sort of a flaw or some sort of a negative part of my life because I threw myself into my school with every single ounce of blood inside of me and I would not take it back for a minute. What was I going to do? Go home and watch episodes of Sex and the City, which was very hot at the time? Instead, no, I was coaching track, I was teaching, I was great, I was doing all this stuff. I am sure I made hundreds of mistakes every day, but I betcha if I asked my students, and I'm not going to, we don't need to make this an experiment, but I bet if I asked, they would say it was awesome.
So having said that, I want to point out something else that you mentioned in this article, which is as coaches and mentors, making sure that we're highlighting the good things we're seeing. Even simple messages you say, like, just, I'm glad you're here, or you're making a difference. Sometimes we forget the power of just that kind of feedback to someone who, not just young leaders, but any, or not just young educators, but anyone in this work.
Well, yeah, I think we often feel like we have to give constant constructive criticism to new teachers because we want them to get better, right? And so this goes back to what I talk about a lot, which is replacing the but with the and. So instead of saying to a new teacher, wow, I really enjoyed that lesson, but I wish you had spent more time on the reflection piece.
Mhm.
All that new teacher's going to hear is I didn't spend enough time on the reflection piece. And the next time that you visit their classroom, they're going to spend 20 minutes on the reflection piece, right? They're going to try to do what they need to do to win your favor. If we just replace that sentence with, I really enjoyed that lesson and your reflection, let's talk a little bit more about how much time you spent on that. Because the teacher might have very, very valid reasons for having a shorter reflection period than you think that they might need to have. And so what we need to do is listen to them. Their intention is probably rock solid. It's easy to think it's not because they're new, but guaranteed, they might say, "Hey, I needed to move the reflection piece along because 3 kids in the back, I was losing them." And you might think, "Wow, this is a teacher who's really, really in tuned to her student engagement." So if we listen and we tap into the wealth of experience and the new and exciting ideas they have, we will, not only build respect for them, but allow them to grow more confident that they actually know what they're doing. They have a career of this in them.
You make a point to say also, address the small worries. And when I read that, it just brought back a vivid memory I have of a newer teacher who, I could tell I could just tell by when I would step into his room or stop by to visit him that there was like this increasing anxiety. And so one day he stopped by my office after school and said, "Can we just talk?" And I said, "Yeah." And he actually had a two or three different like post-it notes full of little things he wanted to talk to me about. And they were all little things like,
Mhm.
how much copy paper am I allowed to use? And what do I do if I can't finish the curriculum by this date? Or they were all little things that I'm glad he brought to me because in his mind, they were big things. But by the time we went through those lists, and this is an adult audience, and so I'll just use the paper as an example because our district at that time was being really, I don't know, direct on trying to reduce the amount of paper people were using,
Mhm.
and they were being really heavy handed in like how much you access you had to paper and stuff, and so he was so stressed about not using too much paper, and I finally just said, I don't give a damn how much paper you use. I just want to make sure that whatever you're doing is helping kids be successful in class. So don't worry about that. And if you run out of paper, come and use mine.
Well,
And
exactly.
I just saw the relief on his face, and he just crumpled up those papers and threw them in the trash and was like, "Oh, this was so helpful just to because I was worried about those things, but I'm realizing now they're not as big a deal as I thought
Yeah.
they were."
Well, and when we immerse ourselves in any culture for some time, those little things become non-issues because we know. But new teachers, they worry about them. And, I kind of talk a little bit in this article about parking spaces. When I once hired a new assistant principal and we went through all the things, all the checklists, and then she said, "Okay, where do I park?" And I kind of laughed. And she said, "No, I'm serious." She said, "The last thing I want to do is day one take, the coveted spot of the veteran teacher because they'll know what my car is." And I thought about that. I thought that's really true. And I ended up saying to her, "Don't park in these two parking aisles, because those spots they might as well have signs in them." Until you establish your place in the school culture. So paper is a good one. Dress code's another one. Um, whether you eat in the lounge, where you put your lunch, how you respond to social events, all of those things seem so small when we're entrenched in a culture, but they can be deal breakers for a teacher. And by that, I mean, if we don't help mentor new teachers through those things, they might make a misstep they don't even know they're making. And then all of a sudden somebody's grumbling, "Guess you took my parking spot." And it's hard to recover from that. So I think it's really important to give some time to those small worries.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. When Jack was a little boy, he ended up with Kawasaki, so he was hospitalized for like
Oh,
10 days. It was a horrible, traumatic time in our family, but he ended up healthy and recovered. And you know him today. He's just
right.
a healthy young man. But at the time, we were stuck in this hospital, and I wasn't at my school. And but they were doing an amazing job without me there, which I was so proud of the team. But I remember walking down the hall one day looking for some coffee, and I saw a hospital administrator. He was in his white coat and he had a clipboard, and he was surrounded by all these what I could tell was new people, and I could tell they were new because he was going, "All right, I want you to look in here. This is the copy room, and this is where you're going to find this, and then I'm going to take you down here and show you." And this light bulb just went off in my head. I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh my gosh, when have I ever done that for my team of new teachers?
Right,
Like, when have I walk them through the whole school and alleviate the anxiety of all those small things that I had to figure out every time I joined a new school?"
right.
So how can we reduce the anxiety by just making it easier on people by showing them where stuff is and who people are and how to do things?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
maybe I would argue do it twice. I don't
Mhm.
know about you, Will, but when everyone walks me around somewhere, I only half hear everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need then a few days to settle in and then maybe do that walk again. Then I'll know what my questions are, right? Because I will
Mhm.
have known where each part of that school touches my world. So, I think that's true. And that hospital administrator flipping that light bulb for you probably helped many other people down the road when they thought, "Oh, okay, now I can take that walk."
Why is it important for you also to encourage reflection? Talk about that.
You know, a lot of new teachers struggle with reflecting on their own work, and maybe that's too aggressive. I don't know if they struggle with it, but they don't have practice with
Mm,
it yet. And so that's where principals can really model reflective questions, being thoughtful, not being critical to self-critical. I think that many times we confuse reflection with self-criticism, and we don't want that. Reflection can be, "Oh my gosh, I nailed that. Wow, that was such an amazing lesson. So much energy." So I think we want to encourage it, but we almost have to teach it. And
mhm.
we have to dispel the myth that reflection means looking back and deciding what you will change. Reflection might mean, "I'm going to do it exactly like that again, different content, different day, but I'm going to do it exactly like that because it worked so well." And, I have some questions there. One of them that I love the most is, "What made you proud about today?"
Mhm.
And that answer in itself is reflection, and that can be the end of the sentence right there.
Yeah.
"I was really proud with how engaged my students were." Great. Done. End of reflection.
And you also ask, what will you adjust tomorrow? And so,
Right.
so, so, those are just such simple questions that allow you as a self-learner to just go, okay, this is what worked and this is what I need to change. Jen, I talk about this because I'm working on my fourth book, and I think I have learned, maybe I've said this in other settings. I'm not sure if I've ever said this out loud before. Um, but I think when I work, whether it's with teachers or principals or district leaders, I'm just going to say anyone I've ever met who I feel like is highly effective at their work. And maybe this isn't complete. This is just true in Will's experience. I can't say I can prove it with research, but most of the people that I meet that are highly effective in their work are also highly reflective in their work. They don't just do the work, but they actually are students of their work. They take time to ask the questions you're asking right there. What did I do that worked? What would I do differently next time? And it's that growth mindset that they're constantly looking for ways to refine the process. And so if you can teach someone how to do that, then they remain. I feel like it's a way for them to stay a learner while they're trying to create learning for others.
Right, right. And I think we can wrap up with this final thought that I always have. I've never put this in writing. I don't know if ASCD will let me. We'll see. But we can also say to new teachers and to ourselves, hey, I'm quoting my 17-year-old son, it's not that deep. You don't have to reflect by sitting down in a quiet, dark room for an hour and thinking about this. It can be quick. It
Mhm.
can be a pretty rapid, efficient adjustment in how you're going to approach something going forward. I do a lot of yoga, and I have one of my yoga teachers always says about mid-class, guys, it's just yoga. um, it's just teaching. Is it important? Yes. Does it impact lives? Yes. But every year we have 180, 185 days. We have time. We can do this. We can do it well. We can continue to get better. And we don't have to act like every day is, an extensive brain surgery on someone where their lives are in our hands. We have grace and time. We have years to master this. And like we've talked about earlier, mastery looks a lot different. We might have first year teachers who are masterful. We really might. And if not, that's where we extend that patience and grace and say, oh my gosh, don't worry, you're going to get it tomorrow. It's just teaching. It's okay. So I think what I'm trying to do here is let a little air out of the anxiety tires and
Yeah.
just say, it's okay. You've got this. Oh my gosh, this is why I hired you. You are going to be so awesome. You were awesome today, in fact, and you're going to be awesome tomorrow. And I can't wait to watch.
Well, Jen Schwanke, thank you for this reflection, because that's what we just did. We just reflected together
Right.
on what are the practices that have worked, what are the things we should be avoiding. And so, Principal Matters listeners, if you haven't already read it, you need to get a copy of ASCD's Education Leadership magazine, or go online and find that link to the principal as mentor and coach. And obviously, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And Jen Schwanke, if people want to reach out to you for more feedback, because you've got some great books and some great presentations when it comes to working with leaders and teachers, how can they find you?
Yeah, it's so fun. People can reach out to me anytime. Just, to talk about any of these issues, to come and work with your team, whatever. You can find me at jenschwanke.com. There's a little form you can fill out, and it'll send me an email, and I'll get back to you.
And Principal Matters listeners, you can find this episode and any of the other resources that we provide at Principal Matters at my website at williamdparker.com. I do want to say a quick thank you to Emily Parker Eden, who edits our show and who's also now the executive assistant for Principal Matters. Jen, so sometimes I forget to give a shout out to the person who actually takes all this talking you and I do and make sure that it's edited and beautiful by the time people hear it.
Well, and this is what listeners don't know, is there are times, well, let's go ahead and out ourselves, where I'm like, okay, let's stop. Sorry, Emily, we need to do that again. And Emily, I like to think that she's somewhere in a sound booth giggling as she edits us and makes us sound
Well, and if you've listened,
incredibly eloquent.
and if you've listened to the very end of this show, I just want to say that this entire episode was recorded with Jen Schwanke sitting in her car at an event with her headphones on and her mic hooked up to her laptop in her vehicle. With I can see the sunroof above her.
Oh, I'm dying. I'm so hot right now. I'm like sweating, but I mean, this is what keeps it real, listeners. We want you to know this. Yes, Jen is wilting, but we got some good stuff talked about today.
Principal Matters listeners, thank you for doing what matters every single day. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful week.
Thanks, everyone.
You can find free resources like this one at williamdparker.com. Subscribe for our free weekly newsletter, which contains bonus material, and also check out the links for Grow Academies, Masterminds, Executive Coaching, and Keynote presentations from my books, as well as from Principal Matters Associates. You can find out more under our speakers tab at williamdparker.com. Thank you for learning together, and thank you for doing what matters.